This is Exploring the Human Brain for Psych 101, and my name is Sid Doss. All right. The brain and anatomy, it's a complex 3-pound organ that controls a lot of the human nervous system. It controls thought, memory, emotion, and a bunch of other functions that we'll talk about further in the presentation. It's actually composed of 60% fat and 40% a combination of water, protein, carbohydrates, and salts. It's not a muscle, despite contrary belief. It's just a bunch of blood vessels, nerves, neurons, and glial cells, which help it do all of those complex functions, as I talked about before, the cognitive functions and stuff like that. The brain matter consists of gray matter and white matter that separate the two different systems. The gray matter is composed of neuron somas, while the white is made of axons, which is that long stem that connects neurons together. And the different material is why they have different colors and functions. And you can see that down there in that graphic at the very bottom, the brain and the gray matter and the white matter. And then up there is just a diagram of all the different parts of the brain that we'll be discussing. Well, maybe not all of it, but most of them we'll be talking about and their functions and their emotional roles and the emotional roles they have. The cerebral hemispheres are the two hemispheres in our brain. They're separated by a longitudinal fissure, as you can see in that diagram up there. That splitting the brain, that big rip, it just separates those two hemispheres. So the left hemisphere controls the right side of the body, and the right hemisphere controls the left side of the body. The left hemisphere is involved in language, analytical thinking, and logic, while the right is involved with spatial abilities, facial recognition, visual imagery, music. They're made up by, and I mean by this, like the outside of the brain would be the cerebral cortex, which is the uneven surface of the brain with the folds and bumps, which are actually called gyri and sulci, and those help increase the surface area of the brain, which allows for more brain matter to fit in, which of course is more functions that it's able to do. And of course, I talked about that longitudinal fissure, and then the corpus callosum, which is a thick band of neural fibers that connect the two hemispheres together so they can work together and be happy together. The three major regions of the brain is, of course, the forebrain, and that's the largest and most complex part with higher cognitive functions. The midbrain, which is a main relay station, it relays processes, sounds, and sights to the brain. The hindbrain is vital for life. It regulates functions such as emotional functions and coordinates muscular activity. In the forebrain, the thalamus, the hypothalamus, the hippocampus, the amygdala, and the cerebrum are located there, while the medulla, pons, and cerebellum are located in the hindbrain. And I'm going to go in more depth about all those, of course. So the thalamus, it's an egg-shaped structure in the middle of the brain, and it's a central relay station that sends info to the cerebral cortex. It helps decide what to focus on among the thousands of information that it receives. It also plays a role in consciousness, perception, and sleep. It helps us stay awake and alert, and it helps with, of course, I said this, perception and sleep. Because it's connected to the lymphatic system, which is involved in processing and regulating. It also helps with cognition and memory because it's located in that midbrain section. So the hypothalamus produces hormones. It's the main hormone producer. It just regulates functions such as hunger, thirst, temperature regulation, homeostasis. It also does moods, sleep, just any hormone influences that are needed from the brain. It releases it from many glands, especially the pituitary gland. Um, it also does it influences these by directly influencing the autonomic nervous system, and it's the main link between the endocrine system and the nervous system, which makes it crucial for absolutely all these functions right here. So we have the amygdala, which is involved in emotional learning and emotional memories. It's mainly known to control fear, but also plays a role in aggression, learning through reward and punishment, social communication, understanding. It also works with unconscious memory, which is just like remembering like maybe a fact or something from a long time ago, but it also relates it a lot to emotions. So like you'll feel a certain emotion and then you'll remember a certain memory where you were feeling that emotion. And so the hippocampus, these two go hand in hand. The hippocampus is a small part of the brain, but it works with everything memory, long-term memory, short-term memory, spatial memory, all sorts of memory. It also helps with learning and declarative memory. It also works together with the amygdala as I said, to connect memories and emotions to create an emotional response to a memory. Together, they regulate various emotional functions, including the fight or flight response. So the hindbrain, of course, this is what we're talking about. The medulla and pons are located there. And then the medulla, so it does vital regulating functions such as breathing, heart rate, blood pressure, all sorts of stuff. It also does unconscious processing such as swallowing, balance, and sneezing. While the pons does balance, sleep, and arousal. It also manages pain, and it's a key route for signals to travel to and from the brain. As you can see from this graph over here, you have the pons, the medulla, and the spinal cord. You can see the medulla is right in between the middle two there, which makes it such a key route to get those signals to and from the spinal cord. So from the body and then up into the brain, so it can be processed and received. So the cerebellum versus the cerebrium, they are two little peas in a pod, I would say. The cerebellum is located at the back of the head. It's also called the little brain and the big brain. It's crucial for posture and balance, and it also has possible social and emotional function. It and of course with those movements, it helps with smooth and balanced movements. They're researching more about its role in thoughts, emotions, and social behavior, of course. The cerebellum is the largest part. It's responsible for higher cognitive functions such as judgment, reasoning, problem solving, emotions, and learning. It also maintains homeostasis and controls physical functions as well. So I'm going to talk about the different lobes. There's 4 different lobes. It contains all the stuff that I just talked about, but it's just good to have a little overview, I thought. So the frontal lobe, it's of course located in the front. It's involved in reasoning, motor control, emotion, and language. It contains the motor cortex, the prefrontal cortex, and broncos area. So the motor cortex is crucial in planning and coordinating. The prefrontal cortex is, of course, higher level functioning, and broncos area is language production and processing. It's a language center. It helps you learn language, it helps you speak language. Anything you want to say, it probably goes through the broncos area before. So the parietal lobe, 2 out of 4, of course. And you can see in this diagram, the parietal lobe area is the touch, taste, and hearing section. It mainly processes information from bodily senses. It also allows us to have 2-point discrimination, which is when we are able to figure out with touch alone that 2 objects are touching the skin and nearby points are different objects rather than just one object together. So we have the temporal lobe, which contains the hippocampus and the amygdala, which we have talked about before. That memory and that emotions, they go hand in hand, of course. It makes the lobe vital for senses, language, and of course, memory and emotions, as I just said. It it also helps with visual recognition. It helps us recognize familiar faces and objects. And of course, we have the last part of the brain, which is that very back part. It's called the eyes of the brain because it mainly processes visual information sent from the eyes. It's crucial for spatial processing, which helps the brain decode signals from the eyes, color processing, which allows us to see difference between colors and shades, distance and depth perception, which is how far and how big objects are, which helps a lot with driving and basically any function within life. You need any of these functions to be able to see and process things throughout your life. It does facial recognition, which allows us to recognize familiar objects in people's faces. And of course, for my fun fact, I chose the insula cortex, which is a deep, unknown part of the brain that they're still working on to fully understand. But from what they know, it plays a key role in the nervous system, such as relaying introspective information from the body, of hearing, and emotional regulation. It also can express desires, cravings, and addiction. And so, from my research, it said it regulates emotions like fear, sadness, and disgust, and can play a role in a range of psychological disorders. And it stated in what I was reading that damage to this region of the brain can result in apathy and anxiety due to its crucial functions. And of course, these are my references. Thank you so much for listening. How do I stop recording?